Great. Hi, everyone. My name's Grant Black. I'm the creative director for Rural Media. Thank you so much for joining us on this Monday evening for this webinar, workshop, whatever you might want to call it. We're really excited to launch the ArtFlicks program today, and thank you so much for joining us to do that. So a bit about Rural Media, first of all, if you're not aware of kind of the work that we do. We're based in Hereford, and we have been working with emerging artistic talent and with people wanting to get into the screen industries and media industries for the last 30 odd years. Specifically for myself, when I've been involved with Rural Media, we've worked with Channel 4 on a big multi-annual program called Random Acts, where we made a series of films with emerging talent that went onto Channel 4. We've done New Creators with BBC, which was very similar. Not only was that film work, that was audio and immersive work as well. And then more recently, we've been working more specifically with social media platforms and trying to support emerging artists to make work in that area that they can kind of distribute themselves, and we can support them to distribute as well. More recently, we worked on a program called ArtFlicks, which you'll hear about later on in the program from the project manager who ran that. And that's kind of led us to where we are with ArtFlicks today. So ArtFlicks supports emerging artists to create and distribute original content designed for social media platforms. So why are we sticking with the social media platform idea? Well, for us and for the people that we work with, we think it's a great space for experimenting with your creative practice, a really good place to build a portfolio and potentially build an audience, even though building an audience is great and we always want to reach people. It doesn't always have to be for that very reason. And all of this on social media, it can be done in a really quick and cost-efficient way. And you can just keep creating. So that's why we have launched ArtFlicks, which is going to be for anyone from any artistic or creative practice to join us with these kind of workshops and webinars. And there'll be some commissions as well that we're going to be launching, which I'm going to tell you more about at the end of the session when we've kind of talked with everyone who's going to be joining us on this webinar. And we've got some really great people lined up for you to talk to. We've got people from TikTok. We've got artists themselves who've worked with digital in their specific kind of area of expertise. So we've got a really wide range, great kind of talented speakers for you to hear from today. We will be accepting kind of questions. Hopefully we're going to have time potentially as we go through. I'll be looking at the questions that are coming in. So please do put your questions down in the chat. I'll try to get to them. If they get missed at all, we're going to look through and we will get back to you afterwards. We'll keep a note of who's asked the question, and even after the session, we'll try and kind of get emails out to anyone with kind of specific questions that we haven't been able to answer. But hopefully, we'll be able to talk through some of those as well at the end of the session. After I've talked about the commissioning, we're going to be hearing from Megan from Catch22, who runs another opportunity separate to ArtFlicks called the TikTok Academy, which is really worth staying here and listening out for. It's a really another great opportunity to get into the creative industries. So yeah, please stay online for that one as well. So yeah, without further ado, I will bring our first kind of speaker on to talk to you, and that is Eve Sherlock from TikTok. Hello, Eve.
Hi, Grant. How are you? Thank you.
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good.
Excellent. So, Eve, you work at TikTok. You've got oodles of experience in the digital content creation area. I know that as well, but I won't do the introductions for yourself. You can do that. So if you are happy to tell everyone about yourself and your background and the work that you're doing at TikTok at the moment.
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Eve Sherlock. I have been working at TikTok for just under 2 years, which isn't very long, but in the land of TikTok, which hasn't been established for very long, is actually loads of time. So my role specifically, I am a live content and campaigns manager for the UK. So the clue is in the title. I specialize a bit more in live content. But I'm hoping that kind of what I can share with you today is a bit more of a kind of much well-rounded kind of holistic approach to how anyone really can tap into TikTok and create an audience and really kind of empower themselves to use the platform in a way that kind of suits your needs, you know, whatever your objectives may be. I work a lot, and certainly my role when I first came to TikTok Live was all about building out content initiatives, discovering new talent on the platform, discovering what content verticals and different strands were becoming really popular, and how were our audiences engaging with those different content strands. And then actually taking all of that amazing content and creating a bigger platform for discovery for creators. So over the kind of past year and a half, built out, you know, lots of different kind of strands and series on TikTok Live. So anything from kind of music every Friday, and we do that under like a Take the Mic umbrella, and that's basically like an open mic night on TikTok Live. So musicians, artists, whether they're kind of, you know, establishing their own community on TikTok or they're established off platform, it's giving them a place for audiences to discover them and for them to kind of harness the power of community there and build out their audience. I have worked with creators in fashion, in beauty, in food, in lots of different verticals, and then more recently been working across a couple of partnerships. Just wrapped on Children Need with BBC. We brought Pudsey to TikTok Live for the first time, which was super exciting. And I guess kind of previous to that, I have worked across all different digital content platforms. I've probably tried them all out. So for kind of the past 8 years, I have worked mainly for television production companies, working for some well-known kind of television brands, and building out their digital presence. Those kind of more well-established, those that were kind of brand new television shows and wanted to reach, you know, an audience first on social media. So I've got I would like to think I've got like quite a well-rounded experience before actually coming to a platform like TikTok. And I'm hoping that kind of what I can share with you guys is very much about how you can feel empowered to utilize, you know, any digital platform to create a space that's authentic to you and your content. So I guess that's probably like a good place to start, I hope, is identifying, like, I think a key thing where we would say about, like, everyone is always talking about like what makes good content. And that is completely down to the individual themselves. It's completely down to the audience that you're trying to attract. There isn't a kind of set recipe for success. And often I think sometimes when you go into it trying to maybe copy the success of someone else, that often can be more difficult than trying to find a successful route of your own. So I think a key thing to look at is authenticity. That's what we always say when we're talking to kind of creators who are coming onto the platform for the first time, is what makes you, your brand, your work unique, and how can you find your niche on a platform that, you know, has, you know, global users across and can discover your content at any point in time. The great thing about TikTok, and hopefully that's why people kind of feel, you know, empowered to use it in the first place and as a great place to kind of share their own content and share their ideas and be themselves, is because essentially anyone can go viral on the platform. You know, anyone can be discovered. You don't need to kind of, you know, have any kind of background. You know, Joe Blogs next door can post a video and get 1 million views the next day, and suddenly they're a viral sensation. So I think the great thing there is that it's open to everyone. And I think, you know, especially where you guys are starting out in terms of, you know, finding your path, you know, finding out like how do you seek those opportunities, platforms like TikTok and other digital, you know, content platforms are there for you to create your own platform. And certainly when I was starting out, they weren't as well established, and certainly wasn't that space. And I think now, kind of knowing that actually you can kind of create your own portfolio on the platform, you know, you can use that as a space to experiment, to build out your own audience. I think that's really exciting. And I think that's something that, you know, hopefully can be harnessed for good and serve you well in kind of any way that your career goes and whoever you're working with. And it's all about kind of knowing your audience. So discovering who your audience are, you know, like I said about the authenticity, it's finding out first, who are you on the platform and what is the audience that you want to attract, and then seeking them out. And there's loads of different ways that you can do that in order to engage with an audience. The great thing about TikTok is it's user first. So, you know, you can put out a piece of content and ask people what they think of it, and then take that feedback immediately and help shape the rest of your content strategy. Experimentation is key. You know, you should constantly be, you know, changing ways of how do I engage different audiences, you know, what do I want to deliver here, how can I do that in different ways, what different tools can I use. A lot of what I do is building out like series and strands, like these kind of umbrella terms where different content can be plugged in. Are there, you know, a strategy that you can create with your own content where it's, you know, on a Wednesday you post, you know, a certain series of things, and then on a Friday it's something a little bit different, and kind of comparing those, you know, in terms of performance and how that works. And I think, you know, it's with kind of the TikTok and content and TikTok content that is TikTok first as well. It's all about the art of storytelling. And I think all of you here know that better than anyone. It's just that there's different mediums in terms of telling those stories. And again, I think it's all about discovering kind of how does the way that you deliver that content or deliver that story suit your audience and suit what you're hoping to kind of deliver in that. And Grant, you kind of said at the start there was kind of about like building your audience as well. When I'm speaking to people, and I hear this a lot, it's all about like how many followers do people have? And that's fine. Obviously, followers are great. It's a nice big number that you can kind of throw around. But I would always say that like engagement is a much more valuable thing to be looking at for yourselves. I think especially where you're starting out. You know, an engaged user is way more valuable than, you know, 10 followers, because they care about your content. They're likely to come back and watch your content again. They're likely to interact. I always say, like, if, you know, a lot of creators, especially when they're going live, people come and go. You know, think how quickly you swipe through your For You page or you go into different content. Imagine the actual effort it takes when you leave a comment or you like a piece of content. That means that you've really gotten something from someone. Like, that's an emotional reaction, and I think that is so much more powerful than, you know, a view or a follow potentially. So I think like really looking at how do you engage with your users, and that's a key thing for kind of building out your following on TikTok as well, is that if they feel that they're being spoken to, they're being listened to, they're part of your community, and then they're much likely to stick around and work with you. And people love to kind of be there for the journey on TikTok. You know, like I follow so many creators, and well before I worked on TikTok was, you know, people who I saw kind of work from posting content and then getting somewhere like in the mainstream. And, you know, someone I can think of there is like a Munya Chihuahua, for example, like an incredible comedy creator who was just making videos, you know, on Instagram or on TikTok before, just for trying out his own comedy and finding his own niche. And now he's being booked, you know, like hosting shows on Channel 4 and you know, going off to do, you know, UK tours of stand-up comedy. But he created that for himself, you know, you could see the experimentation. And I think, you know, that would be something, you know, to harness and never kind of be afraid of, as well as is experimenting on the platform. When myself and Grant were kind of speaking before, we hear a lot about, you know, creators who have maybe been on the platform for a year or so, and they go, oh yeah, that's great, but don't look at my old videos, they're really bad, like they're nothing like what I do now. But that's all part of the story, you know, that's all part of the journey. Is you should be getting better, you know, if you're posting, if you're creating art, if you're creating content, whatever, you know, way you want to look at it, you're always on a journey, and it's always getting better and better. And a wonderful thing about bringing in a community with you there is that they really feel like they've gone with you on that journey, and taking you, you know, to new heights. So I think that's a really great thing, is that you can have these platforms that show, you know, from start till now, and that's something that can kind of be celebrated. And I think, you know, that's, you know, a lot of kind of buzzwords and nice things to say, but the great thing about TikTok as well is that it's there to educate. You know, it's a tool whereby if you want to find out, for example, what is the best type of TikTok content about photography, you would just search a hashtag photography, and then you'd find more hashtags, then you'd find more content and more content and more content, and you'll just be inspired by seeing like, okay, cool, this is my genre, this is what others are doing, how can I be inspired? Even if that's just using the same hashtag to target a similar audience that you know is already there, if that's using a particular sound that works really well in that community and that content. TikTok is there to inspire more and better content, and it's all about kind of using all of those tools that you have just as a user yourself to then motivate and kind of inspire how you create your own content on the platform.
So don't mind me jumping in. I've got a couple of questions, one from me and then one from someone who's jumped in. So first of all, what do you think, because you were talking about kind of photography there and the more artistic type of work, and I think there is, we talked about the common misconception about TikTok as a platform for artistic work and creative work. Do you think what is that common kind of misconception when it comes to that on the platform? And do you think there's room for more artistic work? I mean, I noticed the National Theatre, I think they've just reached like 500,000 followers now. So there's definitely kind of an appetite for the more artistic work out there, if you'd agree.
Absolutely. I've got the most niche content on my FYP. Like there's this one account I can think of straight off the bat, and I don't know if anyone else has this, but it's the frogs. They're all knitted. It's a knitted scene, and it's the most incredible, intricate detail. And those videos appear on my FYP like at least once a week. They must take weeks to make. They're incredible. And I think the misconception is that every user goes on to TikTok and they're served videos and content that they know that they'll like, right? So you're surrounded by, content that you're likely to enjoy. So that means that of course there's audiences who are engaging with arts content in their millions on the platform. It's just that, you might not, it's not kind of maybe the most mainstream or maybe what's spoken about. But it's absolutely there. And once you can find that community, that's the most incredible thing, because once you find one, it then has this kind of knock-on effect. And I think great things there and great kind of concepts and content pieces that we see a lot are kind of the making of. I think those are like great concepts in terms of when we talk about art forms, in terms of offering that insight that maybe, isn't always seen in kind of more like traditional media forms. Also the inspiration. I see stuff all the time. I saw a video the other day that was, teaching me new things on my iPhone to make, my video content better. And I was like, oh, great, that's really handy. Didn't go searching for it, didn't go looking for it, but they knew, and that worked for me. So I think like trying not to be too kind of bogged down by what people tell you TikTok should be or what they should tell you, because there's absolutely a place for everyone and content on the platform. It's, as we kind of said, it's the beauty of tapping into an audience that likes it, and then once you have that, it's running with it and creating content that your community are going to enjoy.
Right. And then just one question, which is slightly separate from the work itself, but more about you yourself, from Izzy, which is, what are the career steps like that you need to get a job like yours, and what would you recommend to people as a good starting point?
That is an amazing question. So I applied for my job at TikTok and I thought, I absolutely don't have the experience for this. I literally put in my CV, and when I got the call, I was like, oh, and I was like, I think I might blag this one a little bit. And what I quickly discovered is there are so many transferable skills and so many things that you can do to get into industries. And sometimes roles are just looking for a really specific type of talent. I started out my career as an intern. I did a lot of unpaid internships. I knocked on every door. I sent my CV to pretty much everyone in Ireland and the UK that I thought worked in the media industry. And at TikTok, we have an incredible amount of routes that you can get into. So we have internship schemes every year across all aspects of the business. And that's from everything from like coding to marketing to, content delivery. We've got graduate schemes. So there are so many ways that you can get into somewhere like TikTok. And I would say in any industry, it's just about kind of figuring out like what is your USP and knowing how to really kind of, sell yourself in terms of like, what do you know? And I think the great thing about TikTok, and myself and Grant had this chat as well, is brands everywhere are always trying to tap into young audiences. And the best thing about working with young audiences is that they need young people to tell them what young audiences want. So I can tell you right away, out in meeting you or seeing you are very much sought after by every big brand in the UK right now. So use that to your advantage and use, digital content platforms to inform, your decision making and you as a user, because even just your personal experience is probably offering a huge wealth of value to big established traditional brands who are looking for those insights to continue their success essentially.
Great. Thank you so much. If there's more questions, we'll come back to you later for sure. But thank you so much for that. So yeah, that's incredibly insightful about the TikTok platform. And what's important to know about ArtFlicks is, even though TikTok, there will be a home for the ArtFlicks brand on TikTok for sure, but we're not going to be limited to just TikTok in terms of our digital platforms. We're going to be using kind of, hopefully setting up pages on kind of all the kind of major kind of social media sites as well. And hopefully these skills will be transferable, not just for social media, but digital content, digital platforms in general. The next person I'm going to introduce has been making some some really great work for digital content, not just with kind of choreography and dance, but with a particular expertise in that area, even though I know Seema makes content beyond that as well. But Seema, if you're there, it would be great to see you now. Fantastic. And as by magic, Seema appears. Hello. So Seema, thank you for joining us today. So if you wouldn't mind, it'd be great for you to kind of introduce yourself and talk a bit about your experience, very specifically with your kind of art practice as well within the creation of digital content.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me, Grant. So what can I say about myself? I'd say I'm an artistic director and I specialise in dance film. It can be named lots of different things: screen dance, dance film, video dance, dance for the camera. And essentially these films bring together dance, choreography, music and film in a kind of mashup of a genre where you're able to experiment with all of those things to essentially tell stories. These stories are very artistic. You're essentially telling a story, but that's being told by a dancer. So they're non-verbal and they're very visual and they're very experimental. So the types of work that I make specifically look at kind of themes and global themes across the world. I'm looking into climate change at the moment, and I'm making a trilogy of those sorts of films at the moment. But I started making dance film because I used to be a dancer, not a very good one. But I really, really enjoyed the fact that you could actually, really express particular stories that were very current, relatable, told stories from all across the world. And these types of films, because there's no narrative, because there's no words, were very successful across the world as well. So as a film director then, capturing stories told by the body was something that I felt was being a really fresh, original way of telling stories. So the types of films that I've made over the 15 years that I've been making them have been quite successful in film festivals. You'll see lots of these types of films on Channel 4 Random Acts, very successful on things like Nowness, and now on social media. So I often make a very short film, 3 to 5 minutes long, with very few dancers. It's not like a whole massive troupe of dancers. And I specifically will look at a particular story. And then we'll come together with different artists and we'll come together and we'll have a look at those particular themes and go, right, how can we tell this story? So the beauty of dance film and why I guess it's so successful in terms of the viewers that want to watch this type of content is that you can really experiment with it and you can be really abstract with it. So when you go to a stage, you watch a stage performance, you see a performance on stage, you see a whole troupe of dancers, and you're sitting there and you're watching this feature film kind of length of story. And, you could get lost, if you were to film that. So capturing just a small element of that, but really pushing the boundaries of how you can artistically bring all of those elements that you would see on a stage into a few minutes is a great way of A, showcasing your creativity, B, bringing some really amazing collaborators together, which is film, dance, choreographers, music, composition, and just making something that's short, that everybody will, can relate to it, and you essentially moving people, emotionally as well as with visually. So I guess what I would like to really share today is more about the process of making those types of films. So I start off with creating a theme, and I kind of essentially work backwards. So first of all, I think to myself, well, who's the audience? Who's going to watch this? Why is that relevant right now? I'm always looking for something that's really current, that's happening. So climate change for me, I believe, is going to be the story of the world. It really is the story of the world. And everybody's affected by that in very different ways all across the world. I like to connect international stories with the UK. And so in doing that, you just get a chance to kind of really experiment with that film. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is make short films that audiences would like to watch. So I'll just repeat myself now. So I try to work backwards. Where is the audience? So first of all, you've got a global audience, so that's amazing. So you've got no words in that. Second of all, I work with climate change. So what's affecting people right now? So I really research that. And then thirdly, then I'll try and find those collaborators who are interested in the same sort of themes, that want to make that type of content. And so once you start working backwards, that's when your story starts to materialize. So essentially, it's kind of like, at the moment, I'm working with the elements, which are air, water, fire, and earth. Those are very big elements. And so trying to find ways of connecting those sorts of stories across the world is where I would start. So a lot of my work at the moment, I do share that on YouTube. It gets a lot of hits on YouTube and a lot of viewers on YouTube. But I use social media as a way of firstly making really small sound bites of that. Really like, what is that theme? And how can I tell that story in literally 30 seconds? And so I find I will create numerous trailers for the one film, which is 3 to 5 minutes long, and kind of redirect everybody to then YouTube where it will sit. And instead, where the audience will go. And that's how I use social media and YouTube specifically to share all this type of work. But I'd say that one of the biggest tips is make your work short and make sure you're with a team of people who really want to tell that story of that particular theme. It could be anything about people, diversity, equality, community, climate change, whatever you decide, but keep those collaborators with you and always be thinking of the next film that you're going to make and then the next film after that. So I often work with trilogies. I feel that really works. You make the first film and then you would release a trilogy over the next few years. And that's kind of pretty much my process.
That's great. And so important and to talk about collaboration, because I think social media sometimes can feel like quite a lonely place if you're going at it alone. So to find those collaborators to kind of help you on your journey is a really kind of important first step. What advice would you give to people who are looking to collaborate? How do you like seek out those collaborators? It's not easy as a kind of a new artist or creator to do that.
Yeah, well, what I do is I try and watch as much content as possible. And it's so important to go out and see things. So obviously we see a lot of things on digital. You can find lots of artists that are kind of making work, dancers that are making work, choreographers that are making work. But when you're making work as well, it has like a whole team of people. You might need somebody who's filming something. You might want to find somebody who's a really good editor, somebody who's like a composer. Just go out and see work. I think forget to do that, and that's so important. There's networking events, you can go to those. I often find that I get people's numbers and contacts and might not see them again, but what I essentially like to do is go and see work. So because my specialism is dance film, I will go to a gig and listen to some composers make music, then I'll go and watch a dance performance where there's dancers and choreographers. So that's always my way of doing it. And if there's something you really like, say to yourself, why do I really like that? Why has that move me in some way? Why have I liked that content that I've seen? Look at that person, find out what else they've done. And you can learn so much from just their careers as well. And then find out who else likes that work. And then essentially you do find your collaborators. Right. But yeah.
And from the flip point of view, we've just had a question in about people that may want to find people like you. So we've got someone who's who talks about that they make music specifically around the social issues that women face. So how would a music producer approach someone like you in order to do that? Do you get that where people kind of approach you, and how would you recommend that new artists approach more experienced people like yourself?
Yeah, well, I a lot of people do approach me, and it's usually via socials. And I just say, yeah, don't ever feel like you can't get in touch with people, because if you're putting content up, you're kind of there for your audience, and you want people to comment, and you want people to say what it is that what they liked about your piece. And so always feel that you can reach out, you know, because that's what socials are for. I do that. I always reach out to people, whether they get back to me or not. I always say, oh, I really like that piece of work. I love the way that you did this, that, or the other. Or I'm really looking for somebody that could do this. And I, you know, just message people. You see content you like, leave a comment and see what sort of feedback that you get.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's very scary to do that, but I think it's really important. And hopefully, you know, with these commissions, you know, if you're creating work yourself online and then you get in contact with someone like yourself and you can pinpoint something you've created online, it makes life a lot easier for you at that point as well, because you've got something to show. One more question for you, Sim, as well, that's come in. This is a question that I'm going to ask you to answer quickly, but it's a very difficult question to answer in a short space of time. But we've got someone who's collaborating with some friends on a short film, and you've talked about collaboration a lot with people. Do you have any advice on the distribution of creative control when working with a group of people? So it's a tough one, but an important one.
Oh yes, that is a really tough one. I think what's essential is when you all come together at the beginning, that you have some sort of sharing of all of your ideas, and you map all of those out, and you kind of find a way of either then kind of discussing how you're going to combine with all of those ideas, or keep them for another time. And then yeah, essentially just everybody working on the same page after that, and making sure that everybody is creatively feeling like they have the freedom to do what they want to do without going off the kind of brief, I guess, you've set for everybody. But I like to kind of have a sharing, then create a brief, then everybody agrees to that brief. And then you go off and you find creative ways of then coming back and fulfilling that brief, then coming back and sharing how you've then said, oh, I've done this little bit of music, can I share the little bit of music? I've done this bit of dance, can I share a bit of that dance? And then obviously with these sorts of things, there are directors, you know, there would be a director who would say, well, actually, let's find a way of bringing all these things together artistically. But I think as long as you're always sharing content and reflecting on it, then, you know, the process gets easier as you get along. Obviously, when it comes to filming these things, that you've got to be at the stage where you're not changing things, you're all set, you all know what you're doing. So yeah, just making sure you put that planning time in with your team, really.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Seema. We might come back to you again later if we've got more questions, but that's great. Thank you so much. So next up, we're going to take we're going to go back to someone who's a creator themselves, a director of TV and of theatre, but someone who also specifically works with us here at Rural Media, and who kind of led the ArtFlicks program, and that is Rachel Lambert. If Rachel can make herself seen there. Fantastic. There's Rachel.
Hello.
So hi, Rachel. So that's great. So we've heard from Eve in kind of the in terms of kind of overseeing lots of different TikTok programs happening. We've talked to Seema, who's kind of talked more specifically from a dance aspect. What was interesting about the ArtFlicks program is it was kind of bringing those together in a kind of a very kind of focused way in one area. So if you could introduce yourself first of all, and then talk about your role on the ArtFlicks program, and then the work that created, that would be excellent. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, of course. So I'm a producer director at Rural Media. I was a theatre director for 12 years, and then I started working in documentary and animation, and then moved into fiction and drama. I started working on ArtFlicks towards the end of last year with Rural Media. And what we did was, what was really interesting was that we basically asked people to apply. They had an application form they had to fill in, and we were essentially asking people to choose their favorite 4 books. This was obviously this was something that was very niche. People might kind of think, well, you know, I'm not a great reader, or I'm a visual artist, or I'm a dancer, but this was very specifically about people who are passionate about these specific 4 books that they wanted to create work on. And the parameters we chose were very much that as long as you could find that book in a large library, then that book would suffice. So it could be a work of fiction, it could be a very old book, it could be a new book, it could be a reference book, technical, it could be an autobiography, it could be a graphic novel, it could be any one of those things. But we wanted people to essentially have a connection to it and have a passion for it. And that's what was really interesting about Eve speaking earlier about connecting to it and making a piece of work your own. This was definitely something that we found with ArtFlicks. The most interesting ideas that came in, and remember, we were assessing commissions that were just on paper. We had no reference to what the work might end up being. They had to be communicated as part of an application form. So people had to articulate what they were going to do. But the ones that really sang and the ones that really kind of shone through were the ones that people had a connection to and had a history with. So there were a number of different ways that they approached it. They either had 4 books that were somehow connected, whether that was theme or writer or heritage or the country of origin. They could be connected in that way. Or it might be 4 very, very disparate, very different books, but that they approached them in a very similar way. So that was probably the two ways that people applied to do ArtFlicks. And what was really interesting was that when the work started coming in, was the originality and the individuality that the pieces of work were able to portray. And you know, it was a really fascinating process to see how people had seen the work, read the book, and then decided to give their interpretation of the book. Because let's face it, it's all about interpretation. We get, you know, we get an awful lot of times people kind of saying, well, I don't need to see a visual stimulus about a book because it's all in my head. I use my imagination. So there's a lot of kind of arguments about I read the book, I don't need to see anything about the book. And I think that I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's really interesting to see people's interpretation. And I think it's really interesting to see how people might make other people excited about a book. And that was at the heart of this. It was about saying, this is my favorite book and this is why I think you should read it. And it was really, really fascinating how different and disparate those pieces of work were. Yeah, I mean, that was the outcome. And then from those, I think we did 11, didn't we, Grant? We had 11 successful commissions. And we had, some people were in their films, some people absolutely featured and at the heart of their films. Other people were very, very much removed. We had animations, we had people who had kind of placed themselves, perhaps their hand, but not their hand with the book and not themselves, their faces. We had other people just, you know, just really looking at the themes of it. We had some people who absolutely just chose to go down the route of humor and to really address it in that way. I mean, how you can take Margaret Atwood and turn it into a really funny piece of work. I mean, hats off to those 2 young women. That was an extraordinary job. But I think what was interesting is, and that was another thing I was going to say, if I've got time to just reference what Eve was saying, I think authenticity is absolutely key. Connecting to the work is really, really key. But the only thing I would say that I thought was really interesting is that I know it's wrong to copy people, but I think it's a really good place to start. And sometimes you have to imitate in order to innovate. And I think as an educator, I find that that's a really, really useful place to start. If you're not quite sure what to do, just like everyone else is saying, look at the content that's out there, look at the films, look at the work. But sometimes if you see something that you think is working, use that as a frame, use that as a template to show what you want to create, because then you'll get confident and then you'll get comfortable about it, and then you'll begin to innovate and create your own work. So I would say there is a place for imitation, perhaps just in your own forum, perhaps just so that you can see that you can do it. But I would say there's something to learn from that. And there are some great artists who, you know, the way that they learned how to make work was to copy other artists, and then they become, you know, they become their own artist. But I think that's a really, really interesting part of the process. I also think it's really interesting to have that, you know, that you can be very serious about very serious issues. But I think there is such a thing as compassion fatigue. And I think sometimes if you can take a satirical look at things, or if you can be slightly irreverent, even though it can be a very, very serious subject matter, I think that's a really interesting route, because it can kind of challenge your audience, and it makes people go, oh, wait, what? Are they making fun of that? And they're often not making fun of the subject matter. They're making fun of people who think differently about that subject matter. So I think that's a really interesting part of the process. Music is really key. We did a lot of work to make sure when we were creating these TikToks that we were making sure that the music that was used was licensed, or we were allowed to use it on TikTok. There's such a thing about fair usage. If you're going to be showing the spine of a book, or the copy of a book, or even pages in a book, there's something about you know, fair use, that you can actually do that, but you've got to be careful. There's a fine line. But I think also what's really interesting, and I think there's a reason why we all like making of, or behind the scenes, or backstage, we all like to see people, well, I hope it's not just me, I think most people like to see people suffer in the creative process. I think it's really interesting. I think that's why we like Bake Off. I think it's like why we like my favorite, Pottery Throwdown, why we like even seeing Professional MasterChef. We like seeing people under pressure. We like seeing that process. And sometimes it doesn't matter what that outcome is. And I think some of the most successful things that I've witnessed on TikTok, and let's face it, I'm probably the oldest person on this Zoom, and yes, I am quite interested in TikTok and do waste many hours on it. But I think those processes where you see people working and you see people trying stuff out, and again that authenticity comes out, and it might not work, but people go, hey, at least I tried. I think so those making of, behind the scenes, you know, this is what I tried to do. And it might be that you share the actual work later on, but if you can kind of drip feed your process, and people can see trial and error, and then maybe, you know, film 5 or film 6 is the finished article, I think that's really, really interesting and engaging. And it's really fascinating. I've kind of, you know, started working on big outdoor performances, and then I work in theatres, and then I worked in film, and now working on TikTok. And it's almost like the platform's got smaller and smaller, and the audience has got bigger and bigger. And what's fascinating about that is that can be a fantastic thing, and it can also be a really scary thing. I think it's really important to imagine, like I'm doing right now. I'm imagining I'm just talking to Grant and everything's fine. If you just imagine that you're creating something and just you and your mates are going to see it, you're probably going to feel more confident about it. Don't think of the millions of people that are going to be scrolling and looking at it. Think about something that you want to make that makes you laugh, or make you and your mates laugh, or that makes you or your community interested or intrigued, or you're passionate about it. Make something that's valuable to you and is authentic to you and your process and your journey or your passions, and you will find that audience, that community is out there. And yeah, I think that's probably it.
You know, I think that's great. I think that's great advice, and I love the idea about giving people homework of, you know, watch more social media and flick through your phone more. Great. We all want to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I hope there's no
when that's
parents
useful
out there.
for your job and your work. Excellent. No, but it is. It's great. It's like, you know, if you're a writer, you should read more. If you're working
Absolutely.
in TV, you should watch more. And if you're going to be making stuff for social media platforms, then you look at stuff on social media platforms.
Absolutely, but also don't be a snob. There are templates out there. Try them out. Try them out, figure them out, and then you will find, you'll go, oh, that doesn't quite work for me, I'm going to do it like this. Great, but you've started and you'll get going. And Elle and I used, you know, lots of different editing programs like CapCut. They're really intuitive, they're really simple, very, very easy to get to know and easy to use. And if you can start there, then you'll start to make your own work in your own way, and quite right too.
Great. And yeah, all that work on all the book flicks can be found at BookFlicks. If you look for it in TikTok, and that's flicks spelt same as ArtFlicks, ICKS at the end. So have a search for that, and you'll see all the content that kind of Rachel helped develop with the young commissioned artists there. Thank you very much, Rachel. Really appreciate that. So next we're going to turn to Lyle Turner, who is a fantastic theatre and film director as well, and TV and everything else. Lyle specifically working with kind of fiction and scripted work when it comes to digital, has got kind of fantastic experience, brilliant reach. So Lyle, hello, thank you for joining us. If you could talk about yourself a little bit, and then the work that you do when it comes to kind of your digital scripted work, that'll be fantastic.
And thank you for the invite, Grant. So I'm the Lyle Turner, creative director at Open Sky. We make, as Grant said, theatre, digital theatre and film. And I write, direct and produce, although I try not to do all of those things all at the same time. And we've had quite an interesting journey as a company when it comes to digital, because before COVID, I was the creative director of a film company, and my life partner and creative partner, Claire, was the artistic director of a theatre company. And we would both come and work with each other. So I would go and write plays that Claire would direct and put on in the theatre, and Claire would come and perform in films that I was making and that kind of thing. And then COVID happened. And what that meant was suddenly everywhere was closed, and the normal avenues of making work were closed to us. So we talked about how we could bring our two skill sets together and make something that would work exclusively online. And the first project that we did was a bunch of short plays where playwrights wrote 5-minute pieces, and we got most of the people working on them actually were theatre people, and then we brought in a handful of film professionals, and we filmed them, and we put them out on YouTube, and we put them out for free, and hundreds of thousands of people watched them. And it just was kind of mind-blowing to us from a theatrical point of view that so many people were watching the work and loving the work and responding to the work, you know. So then, you know, we were very happy about that, and they went on to win the Digital Culture Award. So that was fantastic for us as a company, good profile for the company. But anyway, we did that. We thought that was amazing. And that was the end of the first lockdown. And then we went back into the theatre, and we started making a live show for a live audience in the theatre down at the Bristol Old Vic. We were developing it. And we thought, this is great. This is nearly ready to go. We did a kind of scratch performance of it for a live audience at the Barbican. And this is going to be a great piece of theatre. And then the second lockdown happened. and we were like, and we literally we were at the point of rehearsing. You know, we've been rehearsing with the actors theatrically, and we thought, we've got to pivot. You know, we've done all of this work. We've got to find a way of making it. We can't give up. So we brought in film people again, and then we filmed it. And at that point, something really magical happened. We saw this really like profound crossover of skills between film and theatre people, and we made this basically feature-length film. We didn't know what we were going to do with it, and then we previewed it at the London International Wine Festival, big theatre festival in London. And even just previewing it, we had like 10 or 11,000 people watch it in the first week. And not just watch it, like click on it and turn off, watch the whole thing online. Primarily on Facebook, that was the people were watching it at full length. And so this led us to thinking, look, we need to be much more switched on about this. This is clearly going to redefine how we do everything. And now we make all our work. If it's live, it's going to have a digital element to it, so that it feels like a forward-facing piece of work. often, you know, some ideas we've got a hybrid pieces where there'll be a lot of performance for a live audience, but there'll also be a performance for an online audience. And then there might be a piece which is just pure digital, which is just literally to go online. All very theatrical stories, all with kind of screen technology, you know, applied to them. And the benefits, other than, you know, we've been made a national portfolio organization as a direct result of becoming more digitally kind of flexible, but also just these huge new audiences, you know, that we've been finding. So theatre really struggles. You know, theatre really struggles that the audiences are older, they're white, and they're middle class. And suddenly when you go online and use social media platforms, you can speak to anybody anywhere in the world. So all of these people who are often excluded from the kind of experience of theatre can suddenly access it if it's digital. The size of the audience. You know, if you're involved in subsidized theatre in this country, you're touring, you're talking about audiences of hundreds on the night, if you're lucky, you know, and that it takes a long time to build that up to thousands in, you know, on a national tour, and national touring is becoming harder financially. So digital allows you to speak to hundreds of thousands of people, you know, millions if you're really good at it. And so that's an extraordinary change of mindset for a theatre company. And also and this has been mentioned a couple of times, but you build these communities online, which is incredible, that something which might have been very niche if it was a live performance, because you put it online, it can reach those kinds of people all over the world who already kind of connect via social media. Each show, each topic creates a new community. And so this community of different interest groups who are all connected by theatre kind of grows and grows. And we have people who've stayed, you know, in our communication loop from that very first microplay. We haven't had any drop off really. All the people that have joined our kind of, you know, our YouTube channel or whatever have just stayed with us, which has been incredible, you know, in terms of building an instantly loyal audience. I wouldn't paint, it wouldn't be fair to say that it's not without its creative challenges, making digital theatre. You know, there's a certain magic that comes with live performance, a kind of electricity, the connection between the actors and the audience in the live space. You have to think very carefully about how you're going to try and, you know, recreate that with a camera. You know, so there's a lot of collaboration to be had between whoever's going to be doing the filming aspect of the work. You know, you can just put cameras down and capture a performance and it still work. And if it's a strong enough performance, it'll still be a good experience. But if you want to make a new art form, you've really got to think about how you replace that kind of crackle of the live performance with camera movement and camera shots and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's often easy to let the quality of the filming drop because we're always pushed for time and we're always pushed for money. You know, you need to encourage people who are really talented to collaborate with you in that. If you've got the digital theatre, if you've got theatre skills, you know, you would always try and get the best lighting designer. You'd always try and get the best designer for your costumes. You'd always think about digital in the same way. Try and get the best possible collaborators that you can to help you get started so that you start to learn that language. And something else which is key, which, you know, several of the other speakers have mentioned, is how you promote your work. You know, you have to be equally savvy about how can you break it up into small pieces which work on all the social media platforms so that it gets to the audience. So, you know, there are some challenges. But then the flip side of that is that there are all these amazing creative opportunities that you would never think would happen. And you know, I just remember when we were filming Cold as an example, because the cast had devised the piece theatrically and had rehearsed it theatrically. Normally, if you were just filming for film, I expect to do 5 takes, 7 takes, you know, 8 takes, even more. It can keep going up. But because the actors all had that theatrical kind of immersion in the piece, 2 takes and move on. And it was incredible, the amount of work you could get through in a short space of time. Similarly, kind of doing effects on camera for digital theatre, you know, if somebody wants to make it snow in a film, they go and rent a very expensive snow machine, which is a huge piece of kit that costs loads of money, takes ages to get going. You know, the theatre guys were just saying to us, look, why don't we get a leaf blower and some fake snow and we'll blow it at the camera? It looked amazing, you know. So this, you know, we want to see the sun going through the sky, stick a big light on a stand, spin it, you know, whoosh it across the back of the stage, and we had it. And those kind of things were really like exciting because it was a new kind of creative collaboration, and gave really good results, you know. And then another unexpected advantage was that suddenly, because we filmed the theatre, all of the screen-led industries were then open to seeing it and showing it and sharing it. You know, and Cold was in film festivals for a whole year and won lots of awards, and never once did somebody say, what a weird theatre film. You know, they were just like, that's a cool film, we'll show that. And we really learned that the audiences, particularly younger audiences, don't care what it's called. They just want an authentic story that's told well in whatever way you want to tell it. And that was really good for us. I definitely think I'm the oldest person on the call, by the way, Rachel. But you know, it's like, for those of us who've grown up thinking in these little boxes of film and TV and theatre and so on, you know, young people just want to see good stuff, authentic stuff. So yeah, we're very keen on it, as I think you can tell. And digital lets you tell more authentic stories because there are less creative rules to observe, because it's not operated by gatekeepers at the moment. So that's amazing to be able to do that. You can massively expand the range of people that you collaborate with, which is really exciting. You'll make loads of new friends online, and you'll have a load of fun doing it. So I'm quite a strong advocate for digitalizing your work.
Great, thank you, Lyle. That's excellent. A couple of questions, one from me and then one from someone who's asked a question as well. The one from me, when you made your microplays that went out and kind of went out on YouTube,
yes,
as someone who hadn't necessarily made a lot of digital content or made specific digital content in a series like that before, was there anything surprised you about the way that specific work connected with audiences that you hadn't?
Well, I mean, I think it's you know, it depends. You know, some stuff you have the feeling, particularly if it's short. You know, if you want to go big early with something, it does need to be short, and it needs to have a kind of mass appeal. But if you want stuff to be more niche, then you have to find those existing groups online, and you have to target them more specifically. And that's something that I ask people who are a lot smarter than I am about, how to reach those people in the places that they like to live online. You know, so we have a digital strategist who helps us do that. And again, if you're doing something which is longer, you know, and so Cold was 84 minutes, that's feature length. You really have to find special interest groups online, because the casual passerby online is not going to want to sit down unexpectedly and watch 82 minutes of content. That isn't going to happen. You need to find them. You need to show them, you know, the trailers, the behind the scenes stuff. You need to draw them in, and then they'll watch the whole thing, you know, so.
And by osmosis, you must have known my second question, because you kind of answered it in that. And someone's asked, is it worth spending money to push content? So you talked about a digital strategist that you brought on. Obviously, you can kind of put, you know, with social media platforms, you can do that yourself, sometimes with a small amount of money. But how important is it to, if you're lucky enough to have money, you know, to spend, use it to push the content itself? Yeah.
I mean, we find that both are useful. You know, so if you're talking about spending on social media ads, that will definitely reach lots of eyeballs, but you'll see that the engagement, you know, in terms of the length of view and all that kind of thing, and the number of responses is much lower than if you do it where you go the kind of more organic, kind of PR-led way, where, you know, people find special interest groups online that relate to the content, start chatting to them about it online, and then start posting the short form stuff and do that kind of trail of breadcrumbs thing. So we do both. You know, sometimes you want to make a big splash, and you want to then start converting those into long-term audience members. But often, you know, the kind of approaching people who you know are going to want to see this content is very effective too. So it's always a mixture of both, and just the percentage changes depending on what the objective is.
Great, thank you so much, Lyle. That's excellent. I really appreciate your time. So for our kind of last creative speaker, even though we are going to speak to Megan about TikTok Academy later on, but we're going to speak to Chris Hyde. Hi, Chris. How you doing? Or 1990s, Chris?
Thank you. Yes, thanks for having me, Grant. I'm good. Yeah, thanks for this. This has been great. I've learned a lot. So
good. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's great. It's very, as Rachel said, it's very strange because we're not seeing anyone who's kind of watching in. So I'm hoping I've really enjoyed speaking to everyone again. So I hope everyone else has as well. Chris, so spoken word artist, filmmaker, facilitator, poet, so many things. We've worked together through programs that we've created as well, that you've got a couple commissions for. So yeah, Chris, if you could introduce yourself, and then kind of talk about your process, I suppose, as a poet and a spoken word artist, in your process of making kind of digital content as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So yeah, I'm 1990s Chris. Nice to meet you all. I'm a queer working class writer and poet, as Grant said, and filmmaker, and kind of, anything I can do, I'll give it a go. So yeah, I was very lucky early in my career to be connected with rural media. I grew up in Hereford, so got a couple of great opportunities. Random Acts and New Creatives, as you mentioned before, were both really, really important learning things for me. And incredible opportunities to get, and really kind of set up the way I do work going forward. So for me, I think that this is an interesting conversation because I think I've always thought about my work as digital and not digital, right? So analog and digital, right? Like everything I've always made has always had a place digitally, because that's the kind of that's how I connected with work. Like, I was like, growing up in Hereford, there wasn't just like loads of big poetry events happening. That, there's a Celebrity Poetry Festival, but that wasn't really the kind of stuff I was like into at that time. So yeah, I think that for me, I've always had a digital element to the way that I've been connected with work. So for me, everything is both digital and a live thing for the way that I write, and whether that's a film or a show or whatever. So I've made short films using poetry. I've written poetry-based radio plays, live poetry shows, and I've like written for adverts and stuff as well. So all of those things kind of, some of them are very innately digital and some of them can be transformed across others. So I think that poetry is such an accessible art form in itself that I think that when thinking about it in a digital space, you have a lot of noise to get above. And that's something that I've always kind of thought about. And I think that I always find it very interesting when getting into this conversation with people, because I think people have this kind of idea that maybe not everyone loves poetry, but when I encounter kind of the digital world of art and just adverts and everything right now, there's poetry everywhere. And I think that for me, the journey of making work is about the platforms are very much part of that process. So most of the work that I make is short form work. And the reason that I do that is because I don't have a very long attention span for my own work. So, expecting other people to have that feels a little bit, not the right thing to do. So I try and think about it like this, of like the work you're making exists in a context. So for poetry, the biggest context, the historical one for us at this point in the UK and in North America as well, it's like slam poetry has been the kind of easiest way to access poetry in most places, online or in the physical world. And that has really affected the way that people write. So most poets write now in this kind of vaguely slammy format, which is a 3-minute emotive piece that is got a big emotive arc in it, narrative arc, because that is the thing that does well at slams, and the space for us to perform our work most often as poets is in slam context. So we make the work that fits the platform, right? That, like, from the time I've been involved in poetry, I've seen that change, from when I was first out, kind of like there was a lot of different kind of slam kind of formats. So people were doing it kind of different ways. It kind of universalized a little bit more. So everyone's got their few 3-minute poems that are like big emotional pieces that are getting people on board with what they're talking about. It's interesting to think about that now in terms of like how digital has shaped the way that people write and how I write as well. Like, I think that there's this kind of concept of an Instagram poet, right? Which is something that's seen as kind of in the poetry scene is kind of like, it's a disparaging term, right? It's a kind of, people don't want to be an Instagram poet, which I think there's an idea about it. It's at some form, like in some way, it's like a lowbrow kind of thing. It's not as good as other poetry because you're writing for this specific audience and you're writing for the algorithm, which I think is just really not the right way to think about it. I think often it comes from a place of jealousy and frustration because, you know, slam poetry, move poetry really far on very quickly in the way that, you know, people put their work together. And these platforms have done the same for poetry. We think about them differently now. But the way that I've always kind of approached that is that I make the work that I want to make, and then I will make it work for the platforms that are available to me. I think about for being an artist, for me, it's like about sustainability as an artist and what I can actually get my hands on, right? I think that for me, it's really interesting of like how I used to view it. I used to view that like these big opportunities, these big commissions were like the only things that were important and the only things I could care about. Whereas now I really, you know, have really kind of shifted my frame of reference with that, because I'm an artist between the big opportunities I get, right? They don't come when you're like, they come at weird times when you're not always expecting them or whatever. So I think what's helpful to share with people in this context is that like I will now think about it more as like, what can I, when I was first starting out, I would just make short films using stock footage that I could find for free on the internet. And I'd write a poem over these images and I would share that. It would be like a minute long and I would just do these things. And I had like a varying like levels of different kind of reactions to that. Some people loved it, you know, some people didn't care. Fine, you know, and it kind of was really interesting to me to do that process, because it proved to me that I could put together some visuals and some poetry that would be somewhat compelling. And I think you know, Rachel was talking about kind of just trying it and doing it and kind of seeing what's out there to see what you can kind of emulate. And I think there's been lots of great kind of mentions of collaboration, and that's really what I was trying to do. I was trying to make some work to put out into the world so I could meet other people doing that work, because rural context is also an interesting thing to bring up of like, it's hard to connect with people in a physical space when there's nothing happening around you, or you don't think there's anything happening around you in a way that you can connect with personally, especially for like performance-based work like poetry. So for me, just putting that work out there was just like, I need to make something, I need somewhere for it to go, and my Instagram feed was the place, you know. That was it. So for me, like that was a really good kind of important journey in it, of just making stuff and just putting it out there. And it taught me a really valuable lesson that if you don't make anything, no one knows you're an artist. Like, and that is important. You can have these ideas about things that you want to do, and you can wait till the perfect moment to do what you want to do. But I would encourage you just to make it happen. And your social media, whatever you may use, that digital space, whatever feels right to you, whatever format, like I would encourage you to use that as a portfolio, essentially, to create the work that you do and show it to people. Because I think, you know, like it's really important that we find the people that care about our work as artists and have those conversations around them. It's not that fun being an artist in a vacuum, right? There's a lot to be said as well of like putting yourself out there in that way, and creating work in this digital space. You know, you're getting a lot of feedback, and that might be different feedback from different people. You might not get loads from it each time, but it's really important to have a place to put your work. The same way as like for live performance, for me, slam and open mic was that space. My Instagram feed was just that for my film work or my you know, other kind of more audio based work that I've done. It's like, here's a space where I can actually do it. And I always think about it in this way of like, if there's opportunities that come up that I want to apply for a grant or something, great. But I should always, the way I try and write my work is that if no one gave me any money to do it, I could still do it. I wouldn't be able to do it perfectly how I wanted to do it, but I could still make it, because I make work. That's what I do as an artist. So having that place to put it out there is really important. And a couple of people have mentioned about building an audience and brand and stuff. For me, the way that I've always used my Instagram is a way to like brand myself as a performer and as an artist, because you can put work out there and be like, oh, great. I've put it out there. I've done it. No one's reacted. This was horrible. Everyone hates it. There's a lot you go through in that way. But I would really just say that like, make a event of it for yourself. Like if you've written a piece that's 5 minutes long, cut it up into like 6 little bits that you can share, and like share those snippets of it, because reusing your content, you don't have to write a brand new piece every single time you want to share a post on social media, right? It's like there's a pressure to do that as a writer, especially as a poet, because people think you can just sit and write it down. It's easy, right? It doesn't say that, but you know, but it isn't really like that. There's a lot of kind of through the whole process. So I would really, you know, encourage people to like not feel like they have to feel that pressure to keep making new work all the time, and reuse your content and repurpose it. Like if you've got a 5-minute piece that looks great on YouTube, great. You can also cut that down into a more kind of bite-sized reel. You can put that, you know, there's like so many ways you can just edit it. The editing process for me is about the platform. But what I would say my biggest kind of thing for me is that the digital space was more helpful to me when I was also cultivating actual real life space, going and participating in the scene that was close to me, even if I had to go like a bit of a drive to get there or whatever. Having those personal relationships in real life alongside that digital world is like really important. And that's a way you'll find your niche audience. Because I think with poetry, the way to go is super get right into what you care about, the niche of it, and find those other weirdos that feel that same way you do. Because that's always been great for me. And I always talk about myself as a working class artist and as a queer artist, because those are the people that I want to connect with. So that's kind of what I would say. Make something happen, just do it. You got it right there to put it on, go for it.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. I think it's such an important conversation to talk about how scary it is, you know,
yeah,
put yourself out there, you know,
yeah.
it is really scary, you know, and hopefully with the, you know, commissions we can support in that process, because we're going to be setting up a brand ourselves, but we'd still encourage other people to who don't necessarily get a commission to start building themselves at this time. But, you know, it's not easy, but I think that's a really good point to say, you know, it's not the be all and end all. It can still be a portfolio. And I think that advice about making sure you are doing the live stuff as well, you know, is really super important. A question to you as a creator, but someone now who is also kind of looking at people applying to do stuff. What would you say you have learned? What advice would you give yourself, essentially, having gone through the experience of someone who's created and then someone who's commissioned?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, to share my role now is I work for a non-profit in North America, and what we do is we're a film production grant essentially, and a film festival. So what I've learned from that is that I just want to see that people can, as someone like commissioning, I just want to see that people follow through on their work and make stuff. Like for me, like actually about offering grants often in terms of you know, an application, I'm really like trying to minimize the risk of it not working out the way that the person told me that it was going to work out. So the way that we look at our kind of grant applications is like, does this person have a body of work that makes me believe that they can make this? And one thing that I would look at with that is I would never like discount someone because it looks like they haven't had money to make their things in the past. What I would do though is if, say, no one has tried these things out, I would be like, this might not be the time for this person to take this step if they've not tried these elements out. So a good example of this is we had an animator apply to us this year with a idea of like kind of classic 2D animation, and then all of these projections of like light through trees onto a wall and kind of merging these two things. For me, like I don't work in animation and I don't work in projection, so I don't know how those two things come together. But with the application was an example of both of these things. So I could see that this person knows what they're going to do and how they're going to put those two things together. So all of my concerns and worries are gone. I'm like, wow, yeah, this person can do this. I can see that they can do it. They've been working on it. And I'm happy to give them some money to do the next step and do this like amazing. You know, and I think that's the biggest thing of like, if I could give myself any advice now, I would be like, make more work to prove that you can make the work you want to make.
Yeah, advice. And a question that's just come in for you as well. Besides kind of like followers of your work, like have you found that you can make kind of good connections with collaborators online rather than live? Have you found that, and how have you managed to do that?
Yeah, so I think someone mentioned this earlier. I think it was Seema saying about how like asking the question of people is a really important thing. And I think, yeah, I don't have a crazy amount of followers, but my engagement is always really great. And I think that that's always been really heartening to me. And I think that I ask people for my dream things that I want to happen all the time. So it's about engaging with their work in a real way, though, because if you do it unauthentically, people know, right? So I do this all the time, and I've done this throughout this from the start of my career up until now. Like I did this week, right? Like what I do is I will find someone that I enjoy the work of. I will tell them that I enjoy their work. And if I have an idea of something that we could do together, I would just say, I would love to do this kind of thing with you. And I have made many, many connections in this way. One piece of work I did a couple of years ago was with a producer from Bristol. So it's like an ambient techno soundscape, like radio play kind of thing about living in Bristol. You know, that was like, we kind of met in real life a little bit, but the way that we created that project was online. You know, it was like sending each other stuff, but it was that kind of in-person thing, but also that online thing of like seeing this person's body of work, them seeing my body of work and being like, what can this make together? And you know, that has always been really positive for me. But I always think about it this way: the way you get opportunities is from your peers. I've never really had an opportunity from someone like miles above my station in my career, right? So with someone that I've worked with in the past, or someone around my kind of level. So for me, what I would always say is like, make those connections with those people, and they will come. I think that you know, I did a really big show in London a few years ago with Sleaford Mods, which is like the biggest thing for me. And that was really just because I'd interacted with the producer for that band and just said, I love your stuff. This is great. This is wicked. And we just started talking. And then a thing came up where I was suitable for it. And I was in that list of people they wanted to ask. So you always have to be like the top 5 people in someone's brain. So you got to keep reminding them you're there.
That's for sure.
But yeah.
Great, thank you. There are more questions coming in. We're going to try and get to them later on, but I'm conscious of time. Chris, thank you so much. We may come back to you if we have time a bit later. Awesome. There are more questions coming in, and I am seeing them, everyone. Just trying to get through everything that we can. So what I'm going to do very, very quickly, before we go to Megan, to talk about the TikTok Academy, I'm just going to run through the commissioning opportunities more specifically, just the timeline of that. So I'm going to share my screen so that everyone can see that. I hope everyone can see that. I don't know if everyone can, but I hope they can. So we're going to be commissioning. I hope you've all been very inspired by the amazing people we've spoken to, and the talent and the way and the creators that we've spoken to put yourself forward to create some work yourself. We'd love to hear from you. Our application process is a really simple one. We're not going to ask for a lot of information. We're going to ask some very kind of simple questions about the type of content you want to make, and it's going to be kind of judged on creativity, on the feasibility of making it, very similar to kind of what Chris was talking about, kind of knowing that you can make what you say you're going to make. And then how audience grabbing we think it's going to be, whether that be, as Seema was talking about, with the kind of thematic work that you're going to, and we knowing there's an audience there, or perhaps it's kind of riding on the waves of, like Rachel was saying, other stuff that's been created before in terms of reaching an audience, but we still will be looking for, real kind of creative innovation in that. All the details are going to be online on our ruralmedia.co.uk/ArtFlicks webpage. So please have a look, keep looking back on that. But if you've signed up, we'll be sending you the information as well. In terms of the schedule, application is going to open on the 4th of December. Really light touch application form, like I said. So we're not expecting a lot of words, so don't worry. Not a lot of time to go into it. They'll close on the 4th of Jan, and then we're going to be awarding 4 commissions of £1,000 for people to make a series of kind of four pieces that will kind of sit online with that. Then there'll be development workshops for the commissioned artists through the second half of Jan, with content to be produced by the end of February. There will be a distribution workshop for all people who not necessarily have been commissioned, but anyone who wants to get involved. We're going to be doing a wider distribution workshop. So anyone who's like making their own content or is interested in applying, hopefully in future opportunities, we would really encourage you to come along to that one as well. And then we're going to be launching our ArtFlicks social channels early March and helping you kind of distribute content then. Excuse me. Any other questions you have, please, you can see the info at Raw Media email address at the bottom. Please do get in touch. Then I'll try and answer kind of other questions as well that have come in. I'll tell you what, there's one that's come in that I will address straight away. Yes, this opportunity is right now for people age 18 to 24, this specific one. The reason for that is we're really looking at emerging artists. I know emerging artists can go beyond that, but we offer a lot of opportunities for other people beyond 24. And we're hoping that if we can keep ArtFlicks going, which we're confident we can do next year, there will be other opportunities for creatives beyond the 24 age range as well. But for this kind of small commission opportunity, we are looking at the 18-24. But I realise how frustrating that can be. We will be looking to extend that in the new year. So please do stick with us at Raw Media and at ArtFlicks to see more opportunities that we'll be offering then. I'll have a look at some other questions. Sorry, really conscious of time, everyone, on a Monday night. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Like that, and I'm going to ask Megan to come on, because this is another opportunity with Catch 22 as well. That is just a great opportunity with the TikTok Academy, not associated with ArtFlicks, but we thought a great chance to bring Megan in and talk about that opportunity as well, that outside of ArtFlicks you may want to get involved in. So hello Megan.
Hello everyone.
Thank you for sticking with us for the last hour and a half. And if you could, talk about the TikTok Academy yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. What an amazing hour and a half it's been. I've learned so much. So thank you to all the guest speakers and obviously to Rural Media. As Grant said, I'm from the charity Catch 22, and I have the lucky job of working with young people across the UK on the TikTok Creative Academy. So I do have a very short video that's going to be playing whilst I'm speaking. There is no sound, so please do not ask Grant why there's no sound. That it's just not got any. So I'm going to share that first. I'm going to do the classic, like, I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully you can all see. So just give me one sec. So hopefully now this should start playing and we can go through what the TikTok Creative Academy is. So like I mentioned, I work for the charity Catch 22, and I work on a project that is completely funded and supported by TikTok themselves, and it is to help young creatives aged 18 to 24 who are interested in gaining employment in the creative industry get into that employment. So that could be absolutely anything, not just social media based. We've worked with young people that are interested in the music industry, TV and film, games, photography, poetry, anything that you go, that is creative, that is who I am. That is what this project is for. So what we do is run a new group every single month, except for in December, where we bring on a group of young people and give you sort of the tools to help you sort of advertise who you are and what creative work you can do. So we look at all the skills that maybe sometimes you might think are a bit intimidating. So you've already got them creative ideas, you already got them creative skills, but you might struggle with networking, or you might struggle with building a portfolio, or just being able to say, listen, this is who I am and this is what I do. That can be scary, like being your own sort of hype person. So that is what we look at in our sort of facilitated sessions online, where we talk about all of them things. You get to meet young creatives all from different diverse backgrounds, and you get to see kind of like what they're about and work collaboratively together. One of the best things that you can sort of see throughout this series of videos is you get to work on a collaborated project with other people in your team, and you either produce something that is graphics, film, or music based, and you work together through the whole sort of concept idea of like, this is what you've been given, you actually create the piece of work and how you would present it. And then at the end of the first 4 weeks, you actually get to present it to industry specialists. And that is such a broad, diverse panel. It changes every month. and you get to not only have bragging rights forever that you've just done that, but also you get to have that industry feedback of going, yeah, you are going in the right direction. This is what I give advice for. So very similar to what we've been able to do tonight, of getting them sort of quick fire questions of saying, does this make sense to you? And can you help me? That is what the project is for. What you also get to do during the first 4 weeks is, with the program being mainly remote, we offer a creative visit. So this is where we cover your travel costs for the day, and you can go to creative locations such as Media City in Manchester, Chocolate Studios in London. We've worked with Brit Asia in Birmingham. It's all about sort of getting behind the scenes of a creative place and finding out what happens behind the big curtain and how you can get involved and how you fit into that puzzle. After you've done all of that and you've started getting the bit of the building bricks together, we also give you a career coach as well. So not someone that's going to sit there and tell you what to do, because no one wants that, but someone that can be your continued soundboard of saying, if this is the end goal I want to get to, what steps do I need to take and how do I make these steps and how do I get there? And that is what you'll work together on for up to 6 months. So if you're looking to go self-employed, if you're looking to get an apprenticeship, if you're looking to go work for a company or build a platform up, that is what you and that coach can work on, and have that support of someone that's been there and can tell you what the mistakes they've made and what mistakes to avoid, but also be able to find other people that can give you that advice as well. So we can look at work experience opportunities. We can look at places like Rural Media that might be doing commissions at that time and say, we've got young people that are interested. How do we put them forward for this sort of opportunity? And then it doesn't stop there. So once you start in that role, whether it is you're working somewhere, if you're starting your own business, whatever that might be, you also have in-work support for 6 months. So that can be really scary. I can speak from my own experience of starting a new job and not knowing what's going on is terrifying. So having that person where you already can speak to them about asking them random questions, being able to say to them, listen, I've just been asked about this and I have no idea what this person means. It's all professional jargon, for example, help me. You can speak to them about that and get further advice and support, or whether it's you're wanting to progress even further, whether it's that you've started somewhere and you think this is not what I signed up for and you want to go to the next step, we can help with that. What I will say with all the advice and sort of tips and tricks that we've been given tonight is we try and cover a lot of that in this program of trying to just be that big brother, big sister, just person of support for you throughout the program, so you don't feel alone. And it is one of the best things I've ever worked on. As you can see with some of the slideshow that's going on, that this is all different pieces of work that our young people have made over the past year, and we always like to scream and shout about it and help them on their merry way. And the best advice I'd give is just saying yes to opportunities. I wouldn't have the job that I have right now. When I was training, I didn't know that existed. And it's just by being nosy and asking questions and being open to getting feedback and being wrong in situations that I've been able to find what I'm doing now. So if anyone just want advice from someone that's not necessarily the most creative person in the world, but has had many jobs, it's just say yes and always be the person that's asking the question in the room. And that is the TikTok Creative Program in a bit of a nutshell, really. I've tried to be as quick as possible because I know that you're all getting towards the end. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, you can always reach out to Rural Media, or you can find us on all the socials as well if you just search for TikTok Creative Academy.
That's what I was going to say. What's the best way to kind of find out more? Would it be through just looking up TikTok Creative Academy and you'd come up there, would you, Meg?
Yeah. First one to come up on Google search, but we have all the different social platforms as well if you just search for that as well.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much. It is exactly, well, it's 7:29 on mine, and we said we're going to go to 7:30. We've got quite a few questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep hold of those because I think they're really good questions, and I'm going to throw them out to some of our people to answer in more detail that we can kind of get back to you with, rather than try and rush them through now, I think would be the best thing for those people who have asked us questions. And thank you to everyone who has asked us questions tonight. Thank you for everyone that's been with us tonight, and I hope you've got something really valuable just from listening to the kind of the great speakers that we've had. We would really, really encourage you to apply for a commission. And if you're outside of the age range, then we would continue. We would hope that you stick with us, firstly for our distribution workshop, but also for more opportunities that hopefully we'll be offering in the new year as well. So yes, thank you everyone, and thank you Elle, who has been the kind of technical whiz behind the scene, who has put this all together. Thank you very much as well. But yes, have a nice rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you again to our brilliant speakers, and hopefully, yes, speak to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye now.